Hello everyone, Professor Kurzluck here. So I wanted to make a video building off of our previous discussions about American government, the role of citizens in American democracy, citizen engagement. So we spent some time thinking about what is democracy, really just during this introductory week. What does American government look like? And so I just wanted to make sure that we had everything covered. That maybe we didn't get to in class, that we didn't have an opportunity to talk about. So again, when we think of like what is government, it is as we discussed and we picked apart different pieces of government and things government does, maybe things government doesn't do in a capitalist economic system. But we know that government is really this way of a system for organizing society, allocating authority, and achieving collective goals. This could be prosperity, security, stability. So when we think about what government does, we see that government does a lot of different things. And some of it is, as we discussed in class, some of it is quite obvious. Your interaction with government might be from driving down a road, it might be from being in a public university, it might be going to a courthouse or watching a court case. Maybe you interact with government that way, or if you're in the military. And so building off of that, we also see that sometimes government does things at the most basic level, like protecting property rights. We used the example in class about a coffee shop. Why coffee shops emerge where they do? Because a seller decided that, hey, if I open a coffee stand here, it'll be profitable. There'll be customers who willingly come and spend their money. But property rights, you buy that lot of land, you own that store. You might still pay taxes, everything else that comes along with it, but the government will protect that property right. And so when we see other countries that maybe are struggling for economic growth, for an economic system, the government has a hard time maintaining and protecting property rights in some of those situations. In a successful capitalist state, we see property rights. That when you invest money, that investment will stay with you and will stay with whoever's making the investment. The government's not going to come and take it, but instead is going to make sure others do not come and take it. You have the power of the state behind you. So whether or not we're directly engaging with government, with the state, or it's just passively making sure the economic system works well, government plays, as we talked about, plays a lot of different roles. Even something like maintaining order, laws, courts, again, the police protecting property rights. We see governments protect markets, regulation of banking, labor standards, food and drug safety. You know, when you go to the grocery store, you have a pretty reliable understanding and chance that the food you buy is going to be safe, that you are not going to get sick from the food. Labor standards, you know that you can at least be paid the minimum wage to sell your labor at a workplace, and you have some protections and some safety, some minimum safety standards. So when we think about the government's role in that, it's protecting these markets. So where politics really comes into play is when it comes to like providing redistributive and social safety nets. So when we think about, are there programs to help lower income individuals? Are there programs to help people that maybe got laid off? There we see that the government does provide these goods, but we see a lot of debate over how robust that safety net should be. Should there be a higher minimum wage? Should there be more protections for workers? Should there be greater unemployment rights, perks, like something to help people when they are down? And there we see where politics, elections, debates really come into play, because we know even in a group of 60 people, there's going to be a lot of different views about what the role of government is there. Should there be a bigger social safety net like in Scandinavian countries, or more of an individuality, rugged, pull yourself up by the bootstraps idea of how much safety net should exist? So there, especially with redistributive and social safety nets, we see a big political difference. And that's, again, where engagement in politics, because I'm sure if you have a certain belief, you want elected officials and maybe those that advocate for those to win elections. So there we see a lot with those, we see a lot of political debate. We also see that governments guarantee rights, freedom of speech, religion, due process, built into maybe a constitution, built into laws, that citizens have these rights. So we introduced that there were different types, different forms of government. And we talked about how in a democracy like the US, a representative democracy, that the power ultimately rests with the people. We know in a direct democracy, and we kind of talked about why maybe direct democracy for everything would be messy. Decisions about foreign policy, decisions that maybe average citizens, even well-educated citizens might not know the ins and outs of foreign policy. So we leave a lot of those decisions to elected officials, to people that work in government. And under a representative democracy, that seems to make sense. Now, we do hear criticisms that maybe some foreign policy decisions are actually against the general what Americans want. Maybe we see public polling where 80% of Americans want something or don't want something to happen, and then it does or doesn't happen anyway. And so then we see frustration at the government for doing these foreign policy acts that people say, hey, I didn't want that. But in representative democracy, those decisions are oftentimes made, whereas by representatives, by bureaucrats. Whereas a direct democracy, we can think of it as, like with our textbook used ancient Athens, some New York town meetings. Citizens themselves vote directly on policies. But as we talked about, this could get kind of messy when there are a lot of decisions. So if every decision that the government makes, every policy that the government makes, if it would have to be voted on by the whole population, that we know there's voter fatigue. We know that people are busy, and so maybe they wouldn't want, many people wouldn't want that. Because every little decision about, do you put a stop sign, do you pave this road, every little decision that the government makes would then go to a vote. But as we talked about, some of the big decisions actually do still go to direct democracy. We've seen many ballot initiatives that ask, do you want to enshrine abortion access into states' constitutions, minimum wage discussions, marijuana, whether your state wants to allow recreational or medical marijuana. So we do see, and if you voted, you've probably engaged in some direct democracy. So yes, we live in a representative democracy, but we still engage in some direct democracy. Maybe it's school levies. Do you want to increase taxes 0.25% to fund a new school? And then that goes to the voters. Whereas representative democracy, we represent people that we feel will have our best interests, who have our values, and then they govern for us. So both are types of democracy. Both have some, the literature on this is quite interesting. It shows that some have, they both have some pros and some cons. Like I said, if we had to vote on every little thing in a direct democracy, some people would check out pretty quick. We even see in parliamentary systems where people have to vote like every year as coalitions collapse. People get tired of that. So okay, big takeaway there. Democracy comes in two forms: direct democracy and a representative democracy. We know we have a representative democracy with some pieces of direct democracy within it. Okay, so in our reading, we also saw that there are a couple different theories about who governs: elite theory, pluralist theory. I don't want to cover those so much in this video, but just do make sure that you check those out from the reading. They will come back up in the semester. They'll be covered more in other videos. That's why I don't want to cover them right this second, because we will dig a little deeper into these theories about who governs, who really has the power in a system. So I wanted to next talk about, and I'd like to keep these videos under 20 minutes. I know just watching a video of someone lecturing to you, and we've all experienced this during COVID where our lectures moved to online. I know anything over 10 minutes, anything certainly over 20 minutes, can be hard just to be spoken to in this format. So I try to keep my videos under 20 minutes for class lectures. So I did want to, though, talk a little bit about engagement in a democracy. So when we started the class and we asked, like, why participate? Like, why even bother to participate in a democracy? Well, we know that as people participate and when people participate, it ensures that government reflects people's needs, wills, and wishes. That the government is actually doing what people want. And this, as we saw from the reading, can then challenge elite dominance. Especially, remember, we read about elite theory, so it can challenge elite dominance. And of course, an important piece of voting is that it improves accountability, it improves responsiveness from government. They're being held accountable. When you participate, you are making sure that elected officials are doing what you want them to do, because there's the fear that they will be voted out. That if they're completely ignoring their constituents, they'll lose that next election. And we know there's frustration with this. If we follow news, if we follow politics, we know people are mad. Oh, my elected official isn't doing what I want. We hear this all the time. But that is how representative democracy works. That you try to hold those accountable by staying informed, actually knowing what is going on, and then voting appropriately. And then if enough people vote appropriately, then maybe you can vote that individual out, and someone moves in that maybe represents the district or the piece of the state or even the state differently. But there are other ways to be involved in a democracy. As we talked about contacting your representative, you can write letters, you can write emails, you can call. We've all heard, and I'm sure we've seen people online talking about, well, contact your representative. Tell them to vote yes or no on a certain bill. Contact your representative to let them know that, yeah, you really support them backing this bill, or no, you don't support them backing this bill. You can sign petitions. Part of engagement is doing things like signing petitions or writing letters. Now it's so easy to send emails that we see a lot more people moving towards just emails, but you can still write letters. Other ways to be engaged, and we'll dig into all of these in more detail throughout the semester and videos down the road, are joining interest groups. So we'll spend a week talking about interest groups, the role of interest groups, what an interest group actually is. But by joining an interest group, you can collectively voice your opinions, voice your concerns about a pretty specific topic. So when we talk about interest groups like Sierra Club, Greenpeace, the NRA, these are usually the examples textbooks use to talk about joining an interest group that advocates for a certain purpose. So maybe it's to roll back on pollution, maybe it's to expand access to firearms, depending on what your interest group is. There's probably, as we will see, there's probably an interest group out there that represents views that you hold and beliefs that you have. You can join those groups, and then those groups will advocate to the government for that cause. So we'll definitely spend more time about interest groups later in the semester, joining unions, professional associations, civic groups, and then another way to be involved in politics and involved with government is through collective action. Again, we'll spend time talking about this later in the semester in more detail than this introductory chapter did, but this might be protests, demonstrations, boycotts. We've seen throughout American history people protesting as a way to try to shape public policy, showing their displeasure with governmental policy. Demonstrations, boycotts, refusing to spend money in certain places if they won't change the policy. So we see that there are many, many different ways to have engagement in a democracy. And so why civic engagement matters? Democracy is not self-sustaining. It requires civic activism. It requires citizens to be engaged in the process. So I said we would talk about elite theory later in the semester, but in the introductory chapter, the reading talks about that without participation, elites will dominate unchecked. We'll dig deeper into what that means, if we agree or disagree with it. But one argument for why you should be engaged in government is so everyone's voice is heard. And with participation, we see policies can reflect diverse needs and protect rights. So, thank you for watching. I just wanted to get a video kind of wrapping up Chapter 1. We've talked about a lot of this in more detail. We will throughout the semester. Everything in Chapter 1 of the reading was really just introducing ideas, introducing pieces that we will dig deeper into throughout the semester. We'll dig deeper into civic participation, protests, all of these things. What is democracy? We'll see week after week another piece of American government is covered, but I did want to just kind of make sure I covered these things. I know we talked a lot on Monday, just introductions, and then on Wednesday we talked a lot about pieces of this, but I just wanted to make a video so we're on the same page. Awesome. Thank you all.